Hey everybody, this is Big Mike, your home for progressive news, issues, and candidates here in Colorado. I am here today with Boulder District Attorney Michael Dougherty, running for Attorney General of Colorado. So, Michael, go ahead, introduce yourself, and let the folks know why you're running.
Well, good morning, and thank you so much for having me on. I will say my neighbor and close friend called me Big Mike, but I'm going to defer to you for that title for today. I'm running for Attorney General because we're facing the greatest threat to our democracy in my entire lifetime. And this moment calls for an Attorney General with legal experience and leadership experience to stand up and fight for Colorado, to fight for reproductive rights, public safety, civil rights, consumer protection, and the list goes on. We see so many threats to Colorado right now, including from the federal administration. I'm a candidate who truly has experience responding to crises throughout my career. And I view what we're living through right now in this country as a crisis. And that's why I'm running for Attorney General. I was born in New York, the proud grandson of Irish immigrants, grew up in New York. I went to community college coming out of high school because we didn't have much money. So I loaded trucks at UPS on the night shift while putting myself through community college. I was a member of the Teamsters then. It's part of why I stand strong for workers and unions. And then from there, I went on to law school knowing I was going to go into public service. And I went to law school, and after graduating, had the honor of being hired by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. So I went back to New York City, living in Brooklyn, working in downtown Manhattan, and I served there for 13 years. I rose up through the ranks. I specialized in sex crimes cases and homicide cases, some of the most difficult but meaningful cases to work on in the justice system. I was put in charge of the sex crimes unit as the deputy chief, supervising 50 prosecutors working sex crimes cases. And ultimately, I was appointed to the executive staff, overseeing the day-to-day management and leadership of the entire office of 1,300 people. But most importantly, that's where I met my wife, Antonia. And as a sign of my commitment to consumer protection, I married the head of the identity theft unit. And we moved to Colorado in 2009 so I could work for the Attorney General's office. So we actually left New York City behind, left our family and friends behind, and moved here because Colorado is obviously an amazing place. And I had the job offer from the Attorney General's office to head up a wrongful conviction project to identify people who are in state prison who are actually innocent. And that to me is consistent with what I've done my entire career, which is fighting for justice and doing it with integrity. And 8 months after we arrived, I had the honor of being appointed Deputy Attorney General and being put in charge of the entire criminal section for the AG's office. And then fast forward, I've been the elected district attorney for Boulder County for the past 8 years, and it's truly been an honor, but this moment calls for me to stand up and do everything I can for our state. I think so many of us are doing that. For me, running for Attorney General is the logical thing to do, given my experience as a lawyer, a fighter, and a leader.
Fantastic. And some of your opponents, they seem to be running more on uh, on their history as kind of political activists. You're running from what I can see more on your history as a prosecutor, kind of the top cop lane. Is that a conscious choice from you? And what is your idea of the AG's office? Is it crime? Is it uh, activist for the people? Like what's your goal? What's the split there for you?
I view the Attorney General as the people's lawyer. And that's consistent with what I've done my entire career, standing up in court for the last 30 years, saying, I'm here on behalf of the people. That means fighting corporations, fighting Donald Trump, working to protect our environment, helping consumers, public safety, and the list is pretty long in terms of the everyday impacts the Attorney General has on the lives of Coloradans. But to answer your question, Mike, part of it is I think experience is really important here. If you're making a decision about taking Donald Trump to court or not, that cannot be your first time walking into a courtroom, plain and simple. So it requires experience making those kinds of calls about whether to file a case, how to argue and fight on a case, and how to win that case. It's not enough to take Trump to court and lose. We have to win those fights. Otherwise, we lose the taxpayer money and also the confidence and trust of the people across Colorado. The next attorney general has to lead an office of 724 public servants. They have decided not to be in private practice. They're giving up higher salaries to work in public service because they believe in the leadership of the AG's office. So that experience matters a lot in terms of inspiring them and helping them go forward.
Gotcha. And part of the disillusionment I feel many Americans have today is that they feel there's a two-tier justice system, one for the everyday citizen and one for the elites, the Trumps, the uh, Sackler family, those kind of things. Um, how do we hold powerful people to the same standard as regular citizens? And is it even possible these days?
Yes, it's definitely possible, and I've seen it throughout my own career. And that's what we've done in Boulder County. I will always do justice without fear and without favor. I've successfully prosecuted police officers, corporations, and elected officials because I agree 100% with what you just said. And I think Americans are sick and tired of a two-tier justice system. So I look at Jeffrey Epstein, for example, or closer to home, Tina Peters, where you have Tina Peters sitting in state prison right now, and the governor is considering reducing her sentence, commuting her sentence, because she's a political crony of Donald Trump. And if that happens, it's an absolute miscarriage of justice, but it highlights the two-tier justice system. How many people right now are sitting in state prison in Colorado having the president of the United States demand their release and the governor actually thinking about it because of the political pressure? That's why I've been really outspoken in saying Tina Peters should serve every day of her sentence. She was prosecuted by the Mesa County District Attorney and the Attorney General's office. That speaks to the important role of the Attorney General in supporting district attorneys on public corruption cases and high profile major cases. That's the kind of work I've done throughout my career. But I will always stand for what's right and fight for the people. And it's not a I will, it's what I've done. And throughout my career in Boulder County and before that, I've always recognized that we have a two-tier justice system that exists in different parts of the country, and I will never allow it to happen here in my jurisdiction.
And what about white collar criminals? My favorite example, I graduated in 2009 from high school, literally months after the financial crisis of '08. No one ever went to jail for that. And then, you have what I consider crime is things like health insurance companies essentially causing people's deaths. So, what can we do to hold these people responsible for things that may not be crimes on paper, but affect the lives of millions of people every day?
But you're absolutely right, and I feel the same way. And it's about putting profit over people in each one of those situations when really it should be the reverse. And I will always approach it with the people coming first. I view what happened with the financial crisis in this country as a woeful failure in terms of the people responsible for it being actually held responsible. And as a prosecutor, I have a long track record of holding people accountable when they commit crimes, including white collar crimes. And I'm reminded as a young prosecutor in New York City, I was standing in court one day and I had prosecuted a case where a young person had robbed a store, including for a cup of soup. And he pulled a gun on the storekeeper and he went to state prison. And a week later, I'm in court on a guy who had embezzled $200,000 from his law firm, where he was the accountant for the law firm. And the judge was about to give him probation. And I was saying exactly what you said, which is how do we give the kid, the young person with a cup of soup, state prison, and this guy gets probation? That's that two-tier justice system in action. That's what I've seen time and time again in my career. And I'm going to continue, as I did that day in court where that accountant ended up getting state prison. I'm going to continue to fight against it. We also see it here in Colorado. I'm passionate about environmental protection. With the Trump administration rolling back the EPA, the next attorney general has to step up and do even more. So, for example, the Suncor plant along the highway, as you drive out to the airport, you smell it, you see the smoke. The communities there have been impacted and hurt by it for years. They were fined $2 million by the state of Colorado in a year where they made $2 billion per quarter. To me, that once again is putting profit over people. That is the inverse of how we should operate as a state and how I've always operated as a leader and a prosecutor.
Yeah, and to me, it seems like there's a difference. If you commit violence like in a store, such as with a gun, or if you commit violence behind a desk with a pen, it seems like there's a difference in how we treat those things.
I absolutely agree. And I also would highlight, and as a prosecutor and a leader, I've seen this throughout my career. We have a lot of people end up in the justice system for something they've done once in their life. So, for example, bar fight or drunk driving. Those things are significant, but it could be a one time occurrence for that person. They may never repeat that conduct again. And they should be held responsible, and we should address what brought them into the justice system and do justice, but we should recognize it's a one time thing, perhaps. For the person committing financial fraud, that is never, in my experience, a one time thing. So, insurance fraud, mortgage fraud, Person doesn't do it once and then realize the next day, you know what, I'm not going to do that again. They tend to do it over and over and over again until they're brought to justice. And that's why I've prosecuted cases throughout my career with multi-million dollar losses to victims and always treated those cases as a highest priority because of the damage, but also the intent behind the acts.
And it drives me crazy that Rick Scott sits in the Senate every day and he is
Right.
and complains about fraud, and he is the biggest Medicaid fraudster in the history of the United States.
You are
Like,
absolutely right. And we've seen here in Colorado issues around Medicaid fraud. And in fact, the AG's office, the criminal section that I supervised and led there, has a Medicaid fraud unit. So the Attorney General is uniquely positioned to take people who are committing Medicaid fraud, the providers, and hold them to account.
it just I don't understand how he is not in jail instead of in
Yes,
the Senate.
you're absolutely right about that.
But moving on, you recently came out against private prisons. Love that. Again, this is a progressive channel, all the way for that. Not a big fan of private prisons. I wanted to ask you, um, America's prison system in general is outdated. It's kind of barbaric in terms of the first world. And we have still the highest recidivism rates in the first world. So, what would your ideal carceral system look like?
So, a couple things that I'm thinking about in response to that question. The first is my stance against private prisons is not recent. For the last 6 to 8 years, I've been demanding a ban on private prisons in the state of Colorado. And I actually testified in front of the legislature. I think it was in 2020. I was part of a prison reform task force on behalf of the district attorneys, and I served with other leaders in the state legislature and other parts of state government. We toured state prisons as part of that work. It was 2019, 2020. And we went to, for example, the Crowley County Correctional Facility, which is a private prison owned by a for profit corporation. I am adamantly opposed to private prisons. They should be banned in the state of Colorado. And right now, the Trump administration is literally buying up warehouses to warehouse people. To me, that is a complete failure. And it's offensive to how the American justice system is supposed to operate because profit should have no role in the justice system. So I testified in
Absolutely.
front of the legislature that year, and I've been writing op-eds, I think, every other year since, demanding a ban on private prisons. And as Attorney General, I'm going to fight to make it happen. What we have right now is a lot of attention on it because of the immigrant detention facilities. But really, what we should do in this moment is look in the mirror as a state and say we still have two private prisons operating at the state level. That Crowley County Correctional Facility that I visited, Mike, the day I visited, they had 750 sex offenders there. Now, I know sex offenders aren't going to engender a tremendous amount of sympathy, perhaps, but they still have rights. And one of those rights is to be released back into the community after they complete treatment. That's required. The number of treatment programs in the Crowley County Correctional Facility the day I visited for 750 sex offenders, zero. And to me, that's a complete failure of the justice system. So that's why I'll continue to fight with every ounce of my being to get private prisons banned. To answer your broader question, we can and have to do so much better in terms of prisons being for rehabilitation and not just punishment. We fail the individuals who are going to prison and the communities they're returning to. And that's the part I continue to emphasize in supporting, as I have for years as Boulder County District Attorney, reentry programs. And we have a couple in Boulder County that have been really successful. But we have cases, for example, I had a guy, an individual a couple of years ago who the Department of Corrections for the state dropped him at the Boulder homeless shelter with just a bag of clothing. He had served 20 years in state prison and he's getting dropped at the homeless shelter. There's no way, I shouldn't say no way, but the odds are really slim that that's going to lead to success ultimately. And a month or two later, he got into a really serious altercation. He committed a violent crime and he should and was held responsible. However, I look at the upstream failure when we're dropping someone at the Boulder homeless shelter with a bag of clothing and a pat on the back and a, hey, good luck out there. That's where we as a state have to do so much better in recognizing the prison system needs a complete overhaul. And I'm going to continue to call for that and fight for it.
Fantastic. Um, Governor Polis has plans for, or is trying to get plans for a new prison here in Colorado. Um, do you agree with them, or do you think we need to find another way to start dealing with criminals? Again, the U.S. has one of the highest uh, prison populations in the world, higher than China, higher than Russia,
Right.
and we claim to be the land of the free. So, do we need this new prison? If so, what are the reasons? And if not, what is an alternative way of handling these situations?
There are a couple alternatives, some of which I've done throughout my career. So further upstream in all this is recognizing that if we have restorative justice and diversion programs that are successful, we help people never return to the justice system or prevent them from getting into more serious trouble. So in my office, we have a really robust restorative justice and diversion program, 92% success rate. That means 92% of the offenders complete the program and have the case dismissed as a result, because I don't want them to carry with them the collateral consequences of having a conviction on their record, which makes it so hard for them to get a job, housing, school, and so on. So those diversion programs being successful, that's a preventative measure where we can be helping people earlier in the justice system experience, earlier in their encounter with the police and the justice system, to ensure they never end up going to state prison. That's why I'll continue to lead the effort on criminal justice reform. That's why I'll continue to push for diversion programs throughout the state. It's why I launched the first mental health diversion program in the state of Colorado in 2018. It's been incredibly successful. We have juvenile diversion, adult diversion. I launched the drug diversion program, all these different kinds of programs to keep us from getting into the situation that we now find ourselves in as a state. But also the reentry programs and the lack thereof in Colorado. The prison population is going to go up and down at times. The way we get it down is by helping people who are coming out of prison not go back to prison. So when I was part of that prison reform task force and I toured the state meeting with individuals who were incarcerated, I would ask them at every single stop, if this is your second, third, or fourth time in state prison, what brought you back? And hands would go up all throughout the room. And every time there were no programs for substance abuse or mental health treatment in the community. And they were just left to their own devices, returning to circles that they had operated in previously and getting themselves in trouble. We can do so much better as a state. So yes, we find ourselves in the situation now where we don't have enough prison beds, but we really, as a state, put ourselves in that situation by not engaging in the kind of reforms that I believe are so necessary, that I fought to put in place here in Boulder County, and that have been really successful.
So we are in a situation, like, just on numbers wise, we do need those beds.
I think we need beds, but we also have legislation coming through now. It just passed that will release people earlier in their sentences. So before we create more beds and open up more beds that are going to have a permanent impact on the lives of people being uh, sentenced, I think we should be looking at what the alternatives are right now. And some of those are around changing earn time and good time, and also around parole eligibility. And those changes are going through right now.
Sounds good. All right. Sorry about that.
That's
Uh,
okay.
Wanted to address, we've been seeing reports now from flock cameras. Number one, you have police stalking, particularly women, but stalking people using flock devices. And on top of that, we have several reports of people being put into the system wrong and getting pulled over and over again for no reason. So what is your stance on flock? Are these um, necessary, especially given the amount of data and privacy that it takes from the average citizen?
So I have serious concerns about the privacy rights of individuals being violated through flock cameras, particularly when ICE is using flock to track immigrants or locate immigrants. So what's been problematic with flock is it's not possible for example, the Boulder County Sheriff or the Boulder Police Chief to simply flip a switch and deny ICE access. Believe me, if that was possible, they would have already done so. Flock allows basically law enforcement agencies from other jurisdictions to give ICE access to the flock system. So I've been really outspoken as part of my immigrant protection program in my office that ICE should never be able to access local, state law enforcement resources, and we could talk more about that. We did just last night, unfortunately, have a shooting in Longmont of an individual who's experiencing homelessness. He was shot. The flock cameras in Longmont were shut down by city council for the reasons you just hit on. But as a result, the van that was involved in the shooting is going to be harder to figure out and locate and identify because we don't have those cameras. So I think to your point, it's about striking the right balance. Flock was not doing that from my perspective, but it's about striking the right balance, whether it be for solving violent crimes and traffic safety. But we can never, and I will never allow us to sacrifice privacy interests just in the name of public safety. We've seen countries go down that dark path before, and it's not the way we want to live as Americans.
Right. I mean, that's what we see in China, really.
Right.
Everything is tracked. Any dissent is immediately flagged, and I think that's what people are worried about is further down the line. Getting pulled over by a police officer because somebody typed in your license plate wrong is one thing. Um, you know, if I'm on signal and me and my wife are talking trash about the president and the police show up at my door, that's another uh, another level.
I agree. And right now, that's a valid concern, which if 10 years ago you said that about you and your wife, I would look at you and think, well, that's a strange comment. But right now, that is a valid concern based on the technology and based on where the government is. And I'm going to stand strong to protect individual rights. That's more important than ever, and protecting civil rights. And it's about making sure, once again, that we don't sell out to corporations. We don't allow them to capture our data and sell our data or give it to law enforcement. I've seen that too often in my career, and it's why with our immigrant protection work, I've been really focused on flock cameras and ICE having access to those. And to me, that's unacceptable. It also violates the state law that I helped get passed last year, which expanded protections for immigrants in Colorado. That state and local law enforcement are not allowed under the law to provide any assistance to ICE on immigration detention work. So ICE being able to access those flock cameras to me is a violation of that state law, certainly the spirit of it, if not the letter of it.
Gotcha. And I want to jump over to labor. The Worker Protection Act is making its way through the legislature again after being vetoed by Polis the first time. Do you support that, especially now with Trump in charge of the NLRB? How important is workers' rights in Colorado, and do you support the Worker Protection Act?
Yes, I strongly support the Worker Protection Act. I did last year as well, and I thought, and I called this out publicly, that I thought that Governor Polis's veto of that act, which was a strong bipartisan bill, was a failure to the working class. And we have a growing gap between people who can afford things in Colorado and those who are really struggling. And part of it is around, to me, the power of unions and how much support we give to workers. So coming from New York and growing up in a blue collar family, being a member of the Teamsters when I loaded trucks for UPS, I've seen the power of unions and standing and fighting for workers. And it was with great pride that my family would talk about being a member of a union. And I saw their careers being protected and their salaries being insured and all the protections that unions offer. And for the listeners who don't know, the Worker Protection Act, two things that really jump out at me about that. One is that they have to have a 75% threshold on the vote, and then they have to have 2 rounds of voting. And what I would say to Governor Polis is think about if we had that for elected officials 75% threshold to win office, and then we're going to ask the voters, are you really sure we're going to have you vote again?
Yeah.
We don't require that for any other elective office. We don't require that for anything else we vote on. I think those thresholds are designed to dampen worker protections and to diminish the power of unions. And as I see people continuing to struggle all throughout Colorado with affordability and being able to put food on the table, this Worker Protection Act is a positive step in the right direction, and I will definitely support it. I will always fight for workers. It's why I helped get the wage theft bill passed in 2019. I've prosecuted unscrupulous employers who take advantage of their people, of their staff. It's about making sure people have a fair shot. I mean, I went to community college, and I'm humbled and honored to be sitting here talking to you as the elected district attorney running for attorney general. That's because of the opportunities that were offered to me that are denied to so many now. This Worker Protection Act will give more people the opportunities to lift up themselves and their families.
Yeah, and just to touch on what you said, 75% is such a crazy number. Like, as 75% of people don't agree on anything.
Right.
There's a reason, like even in the Senate, I think a supermajority is 66%.
Yes.
So that's just an absolute unreality. And I don't know if you know a little bit about me. I tried to start a union at my previous job, actually with the team help of the Teamsters. We had the 50%, did not have the 75%, so they wouldn't even bring us to the first election because it's a waste of time and resources for the union if we're not going to win the second election.
Right.
So it essentially functions to make us a right to work state. And basically, just absolutely unbelievable. And yeah, this channel actually started as a Polish hate channel because of the Worker Protection Act. Um, so yes, big props for that.
I
Um,
appreciate your passion and your experience on this issue and how much fight you've brought to it. It's exactly what we need to continue to do, especially right now. As I travel the state, and I truly believe as the people's lawyer, you should be all around the state. I've driven just on weekends alone 17,000 miles since the campaign started. And everywhere I go, I'll ask people, what are the top issues you're concerned about? And I'm not just talking to Democrats, going to parades and fairs and showing up at different kinds of meetings. What are the top issues? And time again, it's affordability and crime. And of course, Donald Trump and the federal administration, but affordability and crime. And when you look at affordability and some part of crime too, a lot of that it ties back to whether people are making enough money to survive and whether they're able to feed their families and pay their rent. And that's the kind of work that I'm going to focus on as Attorney General. It's the kind of work I've done as District Attorney for years.
yeah, and then and the worst part is because we failed, now I'm still at this company and I have a target on my back.
Right.
I'm the guy who tried to get a union started, obviously not very popular with management. Um, so I moved very quickly to a company that was already unionized. Shout out to Liuna 720. So, but yeah, let's jump over. I did want to talk about free speech. You do have a section of it on your um, on your website. I was investigating, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the anti-BDS law in Colorado that basically allows the state to blacklist companies who support boycotting, divesting, and sanctioning Israel. Do you view that as an infringement on the free speech rights of those businesses?
So, yes, I have serious concerns about it. I think part of it, and the reason it's on my website, is because it's a priority for me and always has been. And where I see it as a prosecutor and a leader throughout my career is really a metaphor for what you're describing with the anti BDS, which is there are times where individuals will protest and speak up for what they believe in. You name whatever the issue is. And law enforcement will respond, and then they'll reach out to me and say, do we have enough to make an arrest here? And time again, I'm the person saying they have a First Amendment right to do this. And there are certain lines that they can't cross. There are certain limits, of course. For example, threats tend to be where people go across the line in that situation. But time and time again, defending First Amendment rights. And it's not something that gets a lot of fanfare, especially if someone's not arrested. When you say they have a First Amendment right to do it, probably the best slash worst example I saw was years ago as a prosecutor in the Manhattan DA's office. I was working on a Saturday. The Ku Klux Klan had a permit to march through downtown Manhattan, which is just outrageous. And they had about 300 Klansmen show up. But I was really proud of the fact that they were allowed to march and say their disgusting, vile things. And there were about 3,000 people, including myself, who showed up to yell down at them. And to me, it's about protecting free speech on all sides and recognizing that you can't put the economy first or general rights before that. The First Amendment is first for a reason. And I will always make sure that I fight to protect it.
Yeah, we saw a pretty harsh crackdown on students as well, especially earlier on in the protests against Israel's actions in Gaza. Um, so I mean, what's the balance there when you're talking about? I mean, these are the places people like students are supposed to be learning about free speech, and it seems like these are the places where they are being, targeted. So what can we do on campuses to ensure everyone's safety, but also ensure free speech is respected?
I think it's what you just hit on, which is striking the right balance between public safety, but also allowing people to speak out and protest and speak up for what they believe in and the issues that need attention. So that's where experience comes in, where when these issues come to me at my desk as Attorney General, it will not be the first time that I've made that call. And time again, and I have a long track record of protecting First Amendment rights and making sure that those are of paramount importance and they're honored and respected. And recognizing that if it's a threat or if it's violence, for example, that crosses the line. Someone harming someone else at a protest, that crosses the line. But short of that, I will always be prioritizing First Amendment protections. One example I'll give that kind of ties into that is also protecting our elections and making sure that people have the right to vote. And right now, when we see Trump taking the action he's taking, the next attorney general is going to have to be prepared to protect our elections. I'm hopeful. I was going to say confident, but with Trump, it's hard to say confident. But I'm hopeful that the rule of law will prevail and protect mail in ballots for Coloradans, because that power is delegated to the states by the US Constitution. And we have to fight in court. The rule of law is really the only defense we have, and the elections are the mechanism for affecting change in the future. So I hope people continue to speak out. I hope people continue to show up because we need to fight for change, and that's partly done at the ballot boxes. That's why, as Attorney General, I'll fight to protect mail in ballots, but also to keep ICE away from ballot boxes, making sure people have the right to vote. And to me, I view that as congruous to the right to free speech.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about the environment. You've touched on that in some of your TikToks. Could you tell us a little bit about the water situation in Colorado? The basically the Colorado River Compact is expiring. Tell us what that looks like moving forward and what your role would be in that if you were elected.
Water is a top priority for me as Attorney General. I'm the one candidate who's been focused on water since even before my campaign started. And it's for the very reason you just said, Mike, which is water's at a critical point, and it's the lifeblood of Colorado. I was down in the San Luis Valley last weekend, the agricultural hub for Colorado. I was on the Western Slope a couple weeks before that. And we look at the dwindling supply of water we have throughout Colorado. And I think we all have to be engaged in how we get enough water for our farmers, our ranchers, and all of us to survive. Having led the investigation into the Marshall Fire that took down over 1,000 homes, killed 2 people, and took the lives of many pets, I view this issue as my most important issue as Attorney General on day one, other than fighting the Trump administration and protecting Colorado when they violate the rule of law and harm our state. The reason I say that is because the Colorado River Compact ends this year, as you pointed out. Negotiations between the upper basin and lower basin states have broken down over time. We've not seen success there. There are 40 million people and tribal nations and 2 countries that rely on the Colorado River. So I would much prefer that we have negotiations that result in a settlement that allows everyone to survive while recognizing the scarcity of water we have due to climate change. If those negotiations continue to break down, the Trump administration gets to impose their view, their decision on what to do with the River Compact. That will be my job as Attorney General, to fight the Trump administration if they harm Colorado in that process. And that's a legitimate concern that I have, given what Trump has said about retaliating against Colorado and the steps he's done to do exactly that. So, for example, there was a strong bipartisan effort in Congress, which I don't usually get to tie those words together much, strong bipartisan and Congress in the same sentence, but
Right.
strong bipartisan effort to bring clean water to southeastern Colorado. A few weeks ago, Trump vetoed it. And Lauren Boebert spoke out against Trump, saying he has to put people over politics. I actually retweeted what she had sent out on Twitter. My campaign team was like, "You're retweeting Lauren Boebert. What are you doing?" I'm like, "It's because she's right here, actually." And the fact that she's speaking up against Trump highlights how egregious and harmful this is to Colorado. So water is a top priority. It's about working the Colorado River Compact so we do protect water for ranchers and farmers. It's about engaging in and supporting new technology, such as the Windy Gap River Project up in Fraser, Granby, which I visited a couple months ago as part of my effort to understand and protect Colorado's water. It's a really innovative project, and they're doing more with less. It's also about holding corporate polluters responsible. And I'm the one candidate who's overseeing environmental crimes prosecutions and making sure we're doing everything we can to protect our air, land, and water. And with Trump rolling back the EPA, as I touched on earlier, that's why it's a top priority for me. The state has to step up and do even more to protect our environment. I came to Colorado in part because I'm an ultra runner and I run all these different trail races. I'm also a dad, and I'm just, my eyes are open to what's going on in our state. And I look at the scarcity of water and what that means for the future. The next Attorney General has to hit the ground running on day one to protect Colorado's water, as well as holding environmental violators responsible. The AG has civil enforcement power, criminal power or authority, and also as the attorney for the Department of Public Health and Environment, a state agency that regulates environment in Colorado. So through those three different ways, environmental protection will be a priority for me, and I'm going to fight for every bit of it that we have here in Colorado.
Fantastic. I may need to talk to you about ultra running after this because I do regular running and my knees are killing me. So I need some advice.
The
But
knees are
that's all I
tired.
got, man. Thank you for coming on today. I certainly appreciate you. Best of luck. Could you update us on the campaign? You were going for signatures, is that correct?
Correct. But even after I got enough signatures, I still went through the assembly process because I wanted to honor that process. I'm the only candidate in any statewide office that did both petitions and assembly. And I think
Okay.
we need a complete overhaul of that process, by the way. We need to overhaul that system, but
It's a mess, man.
it is a mess. And we can make it better and easier. Even the petition process, I had to get 1,000 signatures from every congressional district, which makes sense. However, you have people out there with petitions, they're getting them filled out with pen and paper. There's no opportunity to confirm whether someone's a Democrat or if they're eligible to even sign the petition. That's all done later. You would think in 2026 we'd have an election system where someone would come up to you with a keypad and say, "Hey, do you want to support Dougherty and sign the petition to get him on the ballot?" And you'd be able to check, are you a Democrat? Are you eligible to sign? We can make the system so much better. But I'm not, I'm on the ballot, so I'm not complaining about it for my own purposes. I'm just saying for the future, we can improve elections in Colorado, certainly. So I'm on the ballot. June 30th is the primary. I'm really excited about it because I think Coloradans recognize the next attorney general has to be a fighter and a leader and not be hyper partisan. We have 49% of the state are now unaffiliated voters. My wife's an unaffiliated voter, but she tells me I'm strong in her polls and I have her vote. But the issue really is that she and others are tired of hyperpartisan elected officials who aren't actually producing results. I think Congress is probably the prime example of that with how dysfunctional they've become in Congress. I feel like there a couple hundred of them are just social media influencers and not actually doing any work for us as Americans. So I'm always going to be focused on leading and leading with integrity. And I've been a proud, lifelong Democrat, but I've also always been someone who's fought for justice and fought for the rule of law and done it with integrity. Never to get myself on cable TV, never to raise my own political status, never for my own ambition, but because it's the right thing to do. And I would love to have the support of folks. They can learn more at my website, michael4ag.com. I'm also happy to give my email, which is michaeldoughertyco@gmail.com. And I respond to every email I get. And it's really an honor to be on the ballot. And I'm really excited for the June 30th primary.
Well, it was an honor to have you on this morning. Thanks for taking the time out to speak with us. My wife is also a fan of yours. She asked me to let you know. So you had her vote at county assembly. So she greatly appreciates everything you do, and she's a big fan. So
Well, tell her I really appreciate it and give her my best, please. Thank you.
I certainly will. Have a good one.
You too. Have a great day. Thank you.
Bye.